Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I was out driving the rural Pennsylvania logging roads and backwoods around my college late one night. I couldn't sleep because of the oppressive heat of late August in my dorm room. I figured some spirited driving and the AC would relax me. I didn't have class until 6 p.m. the next day, so I had plenty of time. I turned down a logging road I had been down many times before and kept going. It was about 2 a.m., and I was in motoring bliss. Music was playing, and it cooled down enough to have the windows open. I make a couple more turns, then I see someone standing on the side of the road waving. Being naive and overly helpful, slowed down, turned the music off, and stopped to see if they needed help. As I pull up, it looks like a man with gray hair and about late 50s, early 60s. The odd part was, he looked straight out of a 1930s Depression-era picture, just in color. When I asked if he needed help, he said he was just walking to town and told me to be safe. I started driving on for about 10 minutes when I slammed on the brakes. There was no town of any kind for 15 or 20 miles. The only towns in that area we abandoned when the mines left at the turn of the century. There had been one in the area because that was what my research paper was on the previous semester. Slightly rattled, I chalked it up to the late hour and continued down this road, knowing I would come to a main road back to campus in about 10 miles. About 5 more miles down the road, walking in the same direction, on the same side of the road was the same man I had seen earlier. This time I slowed a bit, music still off. As I went past, he looked over and started shouting, "They're coming!" That was that hammer down the next 5 miles to the main road and all the way back to campus. Illegally parked my car in the staff parking, so I wouldn't have to talk across campus at night, and went to bed. Next day, I paid my parking ticket and tried to forget the whole incident.
A couple years back, me and my cousin are walking down this road. The road has woods on both sides. The left side has an embankment and creek. Notice a clearing on the left side. Investigate. Find a car that had flipped over down in the creek. The car doors were shut and none of the windows were broken. Nobody in the car either. It looked like a car was carefully placed upside down in a creek. Nope, the fuck out of there. I went back the next day and the car was gone. No sign of anything ever being there. None of the vegetation was knocked over or anything. Just looked like normal woods and a creek.
I had 2 very odd encounters today. I don't often see much, nothing solid anyway. But today I saw 2 very strange things. First, some context. So we got up early to go yard selling with my girlfriend's parents. I'm staying with her for a while and we wanted something to do. They live in rural Pennsylvania, and it's quite a way out into the mountains near Tioga or something. Anyway, at the beginning of the day we'd set out in the car, people carrier, and I'm sitting way back, so I'm watching the forest pass. It's a rural road, so we're taking it slow so we don't plunge down a hill or something, and I saw this black shape hovering in a pseudo-clearing. It looked a little as if someone had draped black cloth over someone holding out their arms, but there was no person, but the shape was similar. There was no wind and it didn't seem to be doing anything. It was rising slowly into the air and I couldn't see if it was the front or the back. It was completely black, no sun or detail definition. As quickly as I'd seen it, it was gone, lost to my vision. Any ideas? The day went as planned. We'd set out at 11 and I'd spent the day. So within the last hour or so, it was time for us to leave. After the day, my girlfriend's mom offered to give us a lift back to her place. So off we go. This is where I had my second and different encounter. On the drive home, we went over a bridge. As we drove alongside Hammond Lake, I saw a huge black figure in the center of the lake. It's something like 10,000 feet deep or some shit anyway. So this figure looks like a big man, right? But it's all black and the sun is going down by this point. I assumed it was a big dead tree or some shit and was following it with my eye when it started up again, moving as if it were striding through the water. By the time it was out of my view, blocked by the forest side it was walking toward, it had more or less crossed the lake. No, I don't think it's some slender shit. So if I had to guess, it must have been at least 25 feet tall considering it almost reached the tree line. What the fuck was it? It looked proportionate for its size, but I couldn't make out any features. It was more of a silhouette. Just after I saw it, we had a radio announcement that we're expecting freak storms, and sure enough, the thunder is actually shaking the house. What did I see?
I think I manifested a speeding ticket for myself yesterday. It was a negative manifestation, but I think it was a good lesson. I haven't ever gotten pulled over, let alone a ticket, in 13 years of driving. I guess I was going 70 miles per hour down a 55 miles per hour limit rural road, which I drive on all the time. I never saw cops there, didn't even realize I was speeding. It was pitch dark, and the cop showed up out of nowhere, literally from behind a hill going my way. All this is to illustrate how unlikely this is. Heading to the city, I could take the highway or the rural road. Google Maps said there were multiple speed traps on the highway, and I usually prefer the quieter rural road anyway, so I was going to take that one. Then as I reached the fork in the road, where I had to either pick the highway or the other road, I had these strong thoughts of wondering which direction I should pick. I had a feeling in my stomach, which I traditionally associated with going with my gut, telling me to go down the rural road, but also a conflicting feeling that was either in my chest or head telling me to take the highway. I remember specifically thinking that if I stayed calm and went with the stomach feeling, I would manifest the right road to take. I guess the two lessons learned here is that the stomach feeling is the wrong feeling to follow, and that overthinking can fuck you up. I'm still having trouble discerning between that gut feeling and the other head and chest feeling. I'm not used to listening to those. I'm probably not explaining myself properly, but this is the best I can right now.
My girlfriend helped a senile old man. His story was weird. What happened was last night my girlfriend found an elderly man walking along a rural road in the dark. She asked him if he needed help, and he did. The old guy was lost and didn't know where his house was. The old man was apparently barely 5 feet tall and almost 80. My girlfriend ended up asking him questions about his route. Went back to look up addresses he mentioned. He couldn't remember exactly and only had a few pieces, and then narrowed down the area he could have come from. There was a lot of weird stuff about this. He had a brand new phone, no lock, no photos, no apps installed, nothing in favorites. She didn't inspect the address book but saw the call history. No wallpaper and no linked Google account. The calls in the history were from Honey Owl. The old man said he found the phone at some point at a bus stop. When my girlfriend, after almost 2 hours of driving around, located the man's home, she found out from his caretaker he indeed doesn't have a phone. She also then found out that the man hadn't been gone just that day, but had slept in the bed of a truck under carpets the night before. The caretaker said he had been gone for 2 days, and he then revealed the truck thing. She said she hadn't suspected this because the old man seemed clean and trimmed, and the old man hadn't mentioned it. The caretaker wouldn't let the old man inside, and apparently this whole going missing thing happens often. She didn't call the police right that second, but asked my girlfriend to leave her info. She said he seemed cognizant from moment to moment but couldn't remember places, names, etc. I am still shocked she was able to locate his home based on the information given, which was just, I went to a park with turtles and there was a smaller park near it, and from his misremembered names of streets. I guess I just want to know more, because some of the shit he said was strange. Interrogating him wouldn't have helped find his house, and the old guy apparently told her stories about stuff like him living all around the country and in South America for a while, and something about being in the Navy. He said his time in the Navy was at or near San Francisco, and it was a doozy of a time, and he paused several times and said he wasn't allowed to say that after stating something. According to her, she wasn't paying that much attention because she was searching for the old man's house, but it was stuff about submarines and saying it was strange times.
When I was young, I was being investigated for auto theft and shit like that. I was like 18, so I saw the white van follow me around for days, and when I approached them or called them out, it would take off. This is pre-today internet, like 1996. So anyway, I have always been on alert for being followed and stuff like that, so the past few years, odd things have happened around me, such as police cars doing burnouts, or just sitting in front of my house for no reason, or down the road on the corner. I feel like they are still watching. This is the odd part. So last week I was driving away from my home on a rural road, like country. I saw an unmarked glowy coming my way. We passed and I U-turned because I wanted to see if they went to my house. They stopped in the middle of the road before my home. I passed, and they reversed back about 50 feet or more and pulled to the side. So now I'm like, that's really weird, and turned around in my driveway and headed back. The glowy was gone, literally gone. Like I can't even explain, but there is no possible way this car could have moved fast enough for me to unsee it. I feel like I glitched and it was gone. Like, in front of my eyes, but I don't remember seeing it despawn or whatever. I get this sounds schizophrenic, but like, is anyone who is gang-stalked, seen Agent Smith disappear or do inhuman things? I'm really creeped out by it and have been trying to rationalize. It's not the type of discussion I can ask my doctor or family.
Ladies and gentlemen of /X/ some of you may remember me. I don't post very often these days, but I am a skeptic that has long visited /X/ since 2009 or 2010 or so. Generally, I don't believe the bullshit posted here. Most of it is just too unbelievable. I do have a story to tell you all. I'll let you decide what it means. In January of 2013, I bought my godson a car because his truck is getting lousy gas mileage. It was also a second vehicle for him and his GF, something she could use too while he's at work. His boss had for sale a 1984 Buick LeSabre. Brown, good condition, engine was good. He was selling it for $300. I checked everything out on it. Only thing it really needed was an undated sound system since it still had a cassette tape player in it. Engine, transmission, steering, suspension system, etc. All good. Looked like someone had kept extremely good maintenance on the vehicle despite its age. So I bought it, told him to pick it up. It was his. Soon after he got it home, things took a turn for the worse. In mid-February, as they were driving home from a friend's house one night, they were pulled over. Supposedly, they did an illegal lane change. Personally, I think the cops saw the car and thought it was some hoodlums in it. Pick related, it's the car. Well, after an illegal search of the car, gotta have probable cause to search vehicles, they found residue and paraphernalia. Neither he nor his girlfriend would admit to owning it, so they were both taken to jail. Had to stay there overnight, apparently. Next day, I gotta go get the vehicle out of impound because the title and insurance is in my name. That was a fun time because it was freezing cold, and the impound lot was run by apparently crack addicts that had no clue as to what they were doing. Because he is anticipating his upcoming fines, he wants to sell the car. I tell him, okay, I got it for him, he can do what he wants, not a big deal. So he finds a friend needing a car. This is in early March. Godson agrees to sells him the car for $500 and his friend agrees after seeing it. My godson gives him the car, tells him to pay him with his next 2 paychecks. The next day, his friend at work ends up backing a forklift off a loading dock. Forklift is destroyed, he gets seriously hurt. While the friend is in the hospital, he is fired and finds out they are contesting the workman's comp claim. He has 0 insurance because the company he worked for was a rinky-dink operation. Well, godson goes and picks up the car, because obviously friend can't pay. Sell attempt 2 coming now. His girlfriend's mother was needing a second car, so they made her the same offer. It's now late March. They took it out to her, she likes it, and decides she'll get it. They leave it with her, the same payment arrangement they made his friend. So she goes to work that day in her car and gets fired. She's upset driving home, and as she's driving, a vehicle out of nowhere cuts her off, narrowly missing smashing into the front end. She turns to avoid the car and ends up hitting a curb doing almost 40 and jumping onto grass. Blew out all 4 tires, bent rims, and she has some neck damage. No one caught the speeding driver's tag, only a brief description of the vehicle. Once again, they have to reclaim the Buick. So in late April, he and his girlfriend have a court date. His girlfriend gets $1,000 in fines. He gets $1,800 in fines and a month in jail for his first offense over an illegal search. Well, he's an adult, so he's got to take responsibility for his actions. He sits in jail until late May. He gets out, and after asking around all his friends, he decides to put the car on Craigslist for $800. This is mid-June now. 2 days later, he gets a guy contacting him wanting to buy it. So we drove out to where the guy lives in Arcadia, Oklahoma. There, with another friend who's with us that is a notary, I have the title. We'll be able to sign the title over and have it notarized, get bills of sale drawn up. All it needs are signatures. So, we get out there. It's a young guy. He likes the car. Doesn't even look it over. Nothing. Not so much as a hood raise. Pulls out $800, wants it. I'm a little surprised, but okay. I sign everything. He signs. My friend notarizes everything. And we take the money and leave. 3 weeks later, 4th of July night. I'm watching the local news. Warning comes up. Police and Sheriff's Department are looking for a suspect in a gang-related double homicide in Arcadia. Suspect was last seen driving an 80s model brown car. Now I'm thinking, that's kinda an odd coincidence. I wonder if that's the car I sold. Friday next morning, updates overnight. Model being searched for is a brown 80s model Buick. At this point I'm thinking, yeah, that's the guy I sold the car to, thinking back to its history. Sure enough, noon news comes on and they show his face as the suspect they're looking for. Apparently he's a Crips member and he killed 2 Bloods. Awesome. Sarcasm. Well, this got me thinking. You know, my name and information are associated with that car. If the kid hasn't transferred the title yet, I don't want to get caught up in a police investigation. So I called that afternoon the Sheriff's Department, told them we sold the car to the guy after putting it up on Craigslist, gave them the make, model, VIN number, and tag number for the Buick. Included the picture to the detective working the case we took for the Craigslist ad. By Friday night, the new pic had been distributed everywhere, showing the car sitting in my driveway, with identifiable homes in the background, showing it's my street. After seeing that plastered everywhere, and his suspected gang ties, I'm thinking, well, fuck. I just gave the cops all the information about the car, and this guy has my name and home address on that title. If he guesses correctly that I was the one who gave the police the information, who knows what he or his friends might do. Needless to say, I was a bit nervous for the next week or so, pretty vigilant about cars driving by in my neighborhood, especially if I didn't recognize them. I live in a small neighborhood with only 2 streets that connect on a corner. People don't drive through the neighborhood unless they live there generally. Well, about 5 days later, see a news report that they found the Buick abandoned. I'm thinking, great, if he comes by here, I won't know it's him until he gets out, or I get a drive-by. Next day, on the evening news, he turned himself into the police. I kinda wonder what else happened to the guy after he got this damned car, and if the car is cursed, or it's just a big ball of extremely bad luck and coincidence. This is the first time that something has got me doubting about things. Here's where he turned himself in.
Stop role-playing. You blew it with the illegal search.
It wasn't role-playing. See, there's this thing called probable cause for law enforcement to be able to search a car. You gotta know your rights, otherwise police will fuck you over. That is, they have to see or smell something that may give them indication that evidence of a crime may be found within the vehicle. Pulling someone over for an illegal lane change is not probable cause. Considering they found the residue and paraphernalia under the seat, it couldn't be seen from outside the vehicle. It couldn't be smelled from outside the vehicle. There was no heavy odor of marijuana. So yes, it was an illegal search, one which I have my attorney looking into on my godson's behalf. If we can get the dash cam footage through the Freedom of Information Act, it may show that the cops made up a reason to search, without probable cause, in which case it would give my godson the ability to bring a lawsuit against the police department and city. It's an uphill fight, and may be fruitless, but if the cops did it just to be dicks because they profiled the car, then we might be able to do something about a couple of bad cops. Probably not, though. Still trying. Okay, I got off work today and gave a call to the detective that was handling the murder case. I asked him what's going to happen to the car. He said it will stay in police possession until after the trial. If the suspect is convicted of murder, the car will be officially claimed thanks to an Oklahoma law regarding law enforcement being able to claim property used during the commission of a crime, like money during a drug raid or cars from traffickers. When that happens, the next police auction that comes up, it will be sold at auction for whatever it goes for. The money will go to the sheriff's department. If by some chance he is found not guilty, the owner, that is whoever the car is last titled to, will be given a notice in the local paper of intent to claim as property. Then they have 30 days to claim the car, or the police impound files a Title 42 on it, gets a new title, and then they will sell it off at auction, with the money going to the sheriff's department. So it's going to be quite a few months. He didn't know when the guy has court. He suggested going to county court and doing a search for upcoming dockets, or doing an online search to see if I can find it. I'm doing that now, seeing if I can find him.
I was driving through a rural road one night, moving back home with my stuff in the trunk and back seat of my car. In the middle of nowhere, I ran over a nail or something and popped a tire. I drove on a little further and off the road to the Gravely side near a crossroad, hoping I'd be more visible and maybe flag someone down, seeing I didn't have a spare. I waited for what felt like 2 hours with no other cars in sight. I tried calling roadside service from the nearest town, but they were all closed. No mechanics available. After a tirade full of curses and tire kicking, I sat next to my car ass on the Gravely dirt, back against wheel, bolts digging into my shoulders. I didn't give a shit. Then I saw a man walking up to me passing a ditch. It was beyond dark, so I couldn't make out his face. I got up as he came closer. He offered to replace my tires, guaranteed them, and said they'll get me anywhere I wanted to go, that I could go anywhere I pleased perfectly safe and without fail. I told him I didn't have any cash on me, only plastic. He didn't seem interested and said I could write him a promise to pay, which sounded crazy to me. I was clearly just passing through. I told him it was okay and that a tow truck was on its way. He smiled. That I did see. Then he walked back into the ditch and into the tall grass. I got back into the truck and waited for 15 minutes, then drove off on the flat for 30 kilometers, destroying my wheel.
I grew up in rural northwestern Victoria in Australia, where my first girlfriend lived on a cattle station about an hour's drive from my parents' house. 4K-ish people in my town and only 5 families where she lived. The house was on top of a hill that overlooked the whole property and had a big porch out the front. The access road and their driveway looked like pick-related, taken about 50 kilometers away, but had the same dense pines from a paper mill plantation nearby. One night there's a bunch of us teenagers sitting on the porch at night, drinking and smoking like degenerates, when there's a bright red spotlight poking around the trees about 2 kilometers away down the hill. We figured they were deer hunters illegally spotlighting on their property, so she got on the phone and called her dad. About 2 minutes later there were flashing blue lights, and we all cheered that the cops caught the assholes, until the blue and red lights became vertical. Just like that, became up and down instead of moving around the trees. The red and blue flashing went up and down a few times, and then lifted over the treetops, and kept going at a slow pace like a balloon. Not a whoosh, like a typical UFO. We hung over the veranda for over an hour just watching the lights keep rising till they were gone. About a year later I saw a longbat at night on a foggy night while driving home. And a few months after that I saw 2 of them moving upright on wheels in the same swamp and the same fog. It's tough to explain. But yes, upright and on 2 wheels like a Segway. Longbat is my own word for stretched and elongated wombats standing upright in the mist. But everyone I've told, for fear of sounding insane, calls them bunyips. That's the native word for our version of Bigfoot or the Yeti. Fast forward almost 20 years, and I'm working on another cattle station further out with the same clear skies, and more odd things. My coolest thing in the sky experience was seeing a fleet of old commercial 737 airliners that were turned into water bombers during the last bushfires in Victoria and New South Wales a couple of years ago. I stayed on the farm where I was working in the fire line, and got to hear and see them up close as a volunteer CFA firefighter roaring over the horizon. A few months later I saw the same sized silhouettes of those 737s, but triangular in shape, about 30,000 feet up, in complete silence playing pinball with the falling rocks during a meteor shower that was over Central Australia for about 3 weeks. That's the best way I can describe it. The meteors were burning up in the atmosphere not far from where I'm located, but the dark shapes were following them and snapping around in different directions to follow them, like they were playing games. Sucks that I'm Australian and it isn't a meme, but they were boomerang-shaped craft with 3 white lights, one in the front and one on the tip of each wing. It was wild to see, but not proof of aliens. We've got Pine Ridge, which is the equivalent of Area 51 over here, and my place is kind of in the flight line for spooky shit flying inland back to Queensland. It was a real questioning of sanity, though. Here I am after a couple of beers, standing in the middle of the backyard with another mate, looking at the sky saying, "Fucking hell, mate, are they playing pinball up there?" Whatever it was, it's something that I'll never forget. Also, I've seen the Min lights and wasn't impressed. What's really spooky is driving across the Nullarbor between Port Augusta and Ceduna and creeping around the entrances of 300-million-year-old limestone caves with the bones of megafauna in them.
I recently got back from a road trip with my family along the West Coast. We live in El Paso, Texas. Have driven to the Tucson-Phoenix area many other times to visit my uncle. For this specific trip, we were going to drive through that same route, then up California, but that isn't really important. This route we drive on passes near Picacho Peak. We left pretty early, so by around 7 to 9 a.m., we were already in the vicinity. It's been almost a month now, so I don't quite remember exactly at what time this happened, or exactly where. I just remember it was between the hours of 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock, and maybe 50 or so miles before Picacho Peak. Dad is driving. I'm in the back seat listening to tunes and reading. He calls out to me and points to something in the sky near a smaller mountain. After looking around for a bit, I finally see it. It's a black dot. It's just a small, faint black dot hanging in the sky. It looks like it isn't moving at all, and it stays in that same spot the entire time we are driving by. I point it out to my sister, and eventually she sees it too. We begin to round the small mountain it was hanging around and lose sight of it. As we come up to the other side of the mountain, we stop at a rest area. I get out, go piss, and come back to the road to look for the object again. I found it, only now it looks a little more oblong, as though it were beginning to stretch along the horizon. We get back into the car and begin to drive away. I keep my eyes trained on it, and it actually starts to stretch out more. What started off as a smallish speck in the sky is now flattening out to a long, thin black line covering about 2 miles of land at its longest point. As it stretches out, it also gets thinner and thinner. Eventually, it basically stretches out of existence. I wasn't able to get any video or pictures because the morning fog, coupled with my phone camera, made it hard to capture such a faint object. I do, however, clearly remember the date. August 8th.
I debated posting this here because this story really isn't as fascinating as some of the others in this thread, but it's a spooky memory that I cherish, and I never really honor it except when joking about how ridiculous it sounds, like, "Did you know I met the goat man? German Rhineland, around 20 years ago." My childhood best friend and I lived in neighboring towns, separated by a few cornfields at the foot of a hilly forest. There's a path that cuts right through this field, running parallel to the edge of the forest. His house was close to the fields, so like 3 summers in a row we regularly trekked past the fields and up the forested hills for gnome hunting, which is what we called filling a backpack with beer and then hiking up and drinking and smoking up there until late in the day. This one time it got pretty late, and we underestimated how soon the sun would set. We were 14, maybe 15, and we knew we didn't want to be up there in German forest levels of darkness, so we got to moving. The walk out of the forest didn't create any spooks outside of the usual forestry bullshit you experience at night. Sticks breaking, weird animal sounds, disorientation, claustrophobia. the sensation of being watched or followed, but by the time we reached the edge of the forest and got on the path, we were happy to be out in the open field. That changed around halfway across the path. It was dark now, and looking back at the forest, around the area we just walked out of, we both distinctly saw a pair of white, glowing eyes. Now, we didn't immediately freak out because we knew the farm that all the fields belonged to kept horses. We thought that maybe with the moonlight on our backs it was a horse that somehow got out, or livestock or something, whose eyes just happened to reflect moonlight in our direction. Maybe even a wildlife camera. Whatever it was, we curiously watched it for a few seconds. That's when it stood up. In the same perfectly vertical motion of a horse lifting its head, this thing's eyes just lifted upwards. Judging from the trees around it, it must have stood at around 3 to 4 meters when it stood up fully. We bolted home down that path and didn't go out there the rest of the summer. With high school, we kind of lost touch, and I forgot about this whole thing for a while, but we reconnected like 5 years ago, and now we regularly joke about having survived a goatman encounter. I remembered this story because my ex-girlfriend asked me about my scariest encounter a few years ago, and the terror of the moment came back so vividly. Cool story. But I don't want to feel a fear so strong that my legs literally carry me as fast as they can again.
Driving home from work in the down-pouring rain, waiting in traffic like everyone else. Reach a 2-lane hill with a right-only lane. Backup cars slowly progress uphill in the left lane. See in my side mirror some fuck speeding through the right lane. I speed up and close the gap in between the car in front of me. Asshole tries to merge into a 5-inch gap, almost causing an accident. Hit the brakes, lay on the horn. Guy merges and sticks his middle finger out the small back window hatch on his truck. Decide to scare the shit out of them. See him reach over and play with a girl's hair, even better, focused in on her energy, incite a small curse. Rev engine and speed up to their ass and stop before contact multiple times. Hear her start to scream, "It's all your fault!" and scream, sobbing. Guy turns down a side street, follow them. Another curse on the guy this time. Their speed increases more and more each turn I follow. Come to a dead end, they turn around. I cut them off as I turn around too, just glaring at him through my shades with a smile. Hear more screaming from both of them now, sounds like they're fighting with each other. Start moving very slowly so they can't get by, strengthening the attack on the guy. See him open palm hit her in the side of the face. He slams on the gas and tries going around me. About 10 feet away he skids into a telephone pole. Delicious.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.